Chapter 1. The Shadow in the Hollow. The morning mist clung to St. Mary's Hollow like a shroud, softening the edges of the village's stone cottages and muffling the clatter of early risers. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the window of her nephew's guest room, peered through her lace curtains at the familiar scene. She had come for a quiet visit, a respite from St. Mary Mead's own small dramas, but the air today carried a different weight, a whisper of something amiss. She adjusted her spectacles and sipped her tea, her sharp eyes catching the hurried figure of Mrs. Tuttle, the postmistress, bustling toward the village square. Mrs. Tuttle was not one for haste unless gossip propelled her, and her flushed cheeks suggested a tale worth hearing. Miss Marple set her cup down and reached for her shawl. A walk, she decided, would do her good. The square was abuzz when she arrived, a knot of villagers huddled near the bakery. Mrs. Tuttle's voice rose above the murmurs, shrill with excitement. "Who found him this morning, they did. Blood everywhere, and not a soul saw a thing." Miss Marple slowed her step, her knitting bag swinging lightly at her side. She caught the eye of young Tommy Pierce, the baker's boy, who was lingering at the edge of the crowd. "Good morning, Tommy," she said, her tone gentle but inviting. "What's all this fuss about?" Tommy's freckled face paled. "It's Mr. Grayson, miss. Dead he is, murdered in his own house up at Grayson Manor. Gardener found him at dawn." "Dear me," Miss Marple murmured, her mind already turning. Harold Grayson, the reclusive widower who owned half the land around St. Mary's Hollow, was not a man to invite affection. Wealthy, secretive, and sharp-tongued, he had lived alone in his sprawling manor for years, emerging only to bark orders or settle debts. Murder, though, was a different matter. "And what do the police say? They're up there now," Tommy said, glancing nervously toward the manor's distant chimneys. "Inspector Crane's in charge. Says it's a nasty business. Knife, they reckon." Miss Marple nodded, her expression one of mild concern, though her thoughts were racing. A knife suggested intimacy, passion, or desperation. She was about to ask more when a small figure darted through the crowd, nearly colliding with her. It was a girl, no older than 10, with tangled brown hair and wide, unblinking eyes. She wore a patched dress and clutched a tattered notebook to her chest. "Careful, child," Miss Marple said, steadying her. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up, her gaze unnervingly direct. "He screamed," she said, her voice low and matter-of-fact. "Before the knife, he screamed, but no one came." Miss Marple's breath caught. The child's words were precise, chilling, as if she had witnessed the scene herself. "What's your name, dear? And what do you mean by that?" "Eliza Wren," the girl replied, her eyes never leaving Miss Marple's. "I saw it, in my head. The blood was on the rug, and the clock was ticking too loud." The crowd's chatter faded as Miss Marple studied the child. Eliza's face was pale, her expression neither frightened nor boastful, but certain, as if recounting a memory rather than a dream. Mrs. Tuttle, overhearing, clucked her tongue. Now, Eliza, don't be telling your stories. You'll scare folk. Run along home." But Miss Marple held up a hand. "One moment, Mrs. Tuttle. Eliza, how do you know these things? Were you near the manor last night?" Eliza shook her head. "I was in bed, but I remember. I always remember things I shouldn't." A chill ran through Miss Marple, not from the mist, but from the child's words. She had seen many things in her years, liars, dreamers, and schemers, but this was different. Eliza Wren was no ordinary child, and her memories were no idle fancy. "Thank you, Eliza," she said softly. "You've been very helpful. Perhaps we'll talk again." As Eliza slipped back into the crowd, Miss Marple turned toward the manor's distant silhouette. Harold Grayson's death was a puzzle, and this strange child might hold the key. She tightened her grip on her knitting bag, her mind already threading together the first strands of the mystery. St. Mary's Hollow, it seemed, had secrets to spare. Chapter 2. The Child's Vision. The afternoon sun did little to warm St. Mary's Hollow, casting long shadows across the cobbled lane as Miss Jane Marple made her way to the Wren cottage. Her nephew's housekeeper, Mrs. Bantry, had pointed her towards the modest home where Eliza lived with her widowed mother. "A queer pair, those Wrens," Mrs. Bantry had said, her lips pursed. "The mother keeps to herself, and that child, always muttering odd things, gives me the shivers." Miss Marple had nodded politely, but her interest was piqued. Queer or not, Eliza Wren knew something about Harold Grayson's murder, and Miss Marple intended to find out how. The cottage sat at the edge of the village, its garden overgrown with nettles and wild roses. Miss Marple knocked lightly, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. The door creaked open, revealing a thin woman with tired eyes and flour-dusted hands. "Mrs. Wren?" Miss Marple said, her smile warm but measured. "I'm Jane Marple, visiting from St. Mary Mead. I met your daughter, Eliza, this morning. Might I have a word?" Mrs. Wren hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron. "Eliza's not in trouble, is she? She's a good girl, just different." "Not at all," Miss Marple assured her. "She said something curious about Mr. Grayson's death, and I thought she might like to share more. May I come in?" Mrs. Wren stepped aside, and Miss Marple entered a cramped parlour smelling of bread and damp. Eliza sat at a rickety table, her notebook open, scribbling furiously. She looked up as Miss Marple entered, her eyes bright with recognition. "You came," she said, as if she'd expected it. "I did, dear," Miss Marple said, settling into a worn chair. "You told me about a scream and blood on a rug. I'd like to hear more if you're willing." Mrs. Wren hovered nervously. "Eliza, mind yourself. Don't go upsetting Miss Marple with your fancies." "They're not fancies, Mum," Eliza said, her voice firm. She pushed her notebook toward Miss Marple. "I wrote it down. Everything I saw." Miss Marple opened the notebook, her fingers brushing the childish scrawl. The page was filled with fragmented sentences. The knife was silver. The rug was red, then wet. The clock ticked too loud. He begged, but she didn't stop. Her heart quickened. The police had mentioned a knife, but the detail about the clock, a heavy mantelpiece piece in Grayson's study, hadn't been shared publicly, nor had the fact that Grayson's body was found on a crimson rug. She closed the notebook, her mind racing. "Eliza, when did you see these things?" "Last night," Eliza said, "in my sleep. It's like I'm there, but I'm not. I see it all, and it stays in my head." Mrs. Wren wrung her hands. She's been like this since she was little. Dreams that aren't dreams. She'll wake up crying about things she's never seen. Fires, floods, faces. I thought she'd grow out of it. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice gentle but probing. "Eliza, do you know who the she is? The one you wrote about?" Eliza's face clouded. "I don't see her face, just her hands. They're small, and there's a ring, a green stone, like an emerald." She shivered, hugging her arms. She was angry, so angry. Miss Marple's mind turned to the villagers she'd seen in the each-day square. Mrs. Tuttle wore no rings, but the vicar's wife had a fondness for gaudy jewellery. And then there was Dr. Hargrove's nurse, a quiet woman with sharp eyes. A green ring was a clue, but a slippery one. "You've done very well, Eliza," she said, patting the girl's hand. "May I borrow this notebook for a day or two? I'll take good care of it." Eliza nodded, but her eyes were wary. "Be careful, Miss Marple. The lady with the ring, she knows I saw." A chill settled over the room. Mrs. Wren gasped, but Miss Marple kept her composure, though her thoughts were anything but calm. A child who saw things she shouldn't was one matter. A killer who knew of her visions was another. "Thank you, Eliza," she said, rising. "I'll call again soon. Mrs. Wren, keep an eye on her, won't you?" As Miss Marple stepped back into the lane, the notebook tucked safely in her bag, she glanced toward Grayson Manor's distant silhouette. "Eliza's," words echoed in her mind. "She knows I saw." The mystery was no longer just about Harold Grayson's death. It was about a child caught in a web she didn't understand, and a killer who might be watching her every move. Chapter 3. Whispers of the Past. The evening settled over St. Mary's Hollow, with a quiet that felt more oppressive than peaceful. Miss Jane Marple sat in the parlour of her nephew's cottage, Eliza Wren's notebook open on her lap. The child's words, "The knife was silver." She was angry, lingered like a melody she couldn't quite place. But it was the mention of Harold Grayson's murder, tied to details no one outside the police should know, that set her mind to work. To understand the present, she needed to unravel the past. And Harold Grayson's past was a tapestry of shadows. She closed the notebook and reached for her shawl. The village library, modest though it was, kept old newspapers and records, and Miss Marple had a hunch that Grayson's wealth and reclusiveness hid more than eccentricity. She slipped out into the dusk, her steps brisk despite the ache in her knees. The library was a single room above the village hall. its shelves sagging under dusty tomes and yellowed papers. Miss Marple found Mrs. Phipps, the librarian, sorting clippings at a cluttered desk. "Good evening, Mrs. Phipps," she said, her smile disarming. "I wonder if you might help me with a bit of history. I'm curious about Mr. Grayson, his time in St. Mary's Hollow." Mrs. Phipps adjusted her spectacles, her curiosity piqued. "Harold Grayson? A sour man, rest his soul. Kept to himself after his wife passed, 15 years ago. Why do you ask?" "Oh, just tying up loose ends," Miss Marple said vaguely, her eyes scanning the shelves. "Were there ever any stories about him? Old scandals, perhaps?" Mrs. Phipps leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well, there was talk 20 years back. Grayson was tangled up with the Linton family. You know, the ones who owned the big estate before it burned down. The daughter, Clara Linton, was an heiress, set to inherit a fortune in jewels and land. Then she vanished, and the money with her. Folks said Grayson had something to do with it. He was her suitor, see, before he married his wife." Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her knitting bag. "Vanished? How extraordinary! Was there no trace of her?" "Not a one," Mrs. Phipps said, shaking her head. "The police searched for months. Some thought she ran off with a lover. Others said she was, well, done away with. Grayson was questioned, but nothing stuck. He came into money not long after, mind you. Bought up half the village. Indeed," Miss Marple murmured, her mind racing. "A missing heiress, a fortune, and a man now dead by a silver knife. The pieces didn't yet fit, but they were beginning to form a pattern." "Might I see any records from that time? Newspapers, perhaps?" Mrs. Phipps bustled to a corner shelf, returning with a stack of brittle papers. "These are from 1905, around the time Clara disappeared. Mind you, they're fragile." Miss Marple spent the next hour poring over the clippings, her sharp eyes catching every detail. The Hollow Gazette described Clara Linton as a beauty with a fiery spirit, last seen at a village fete. Her father, Sir Edmund Linton, had died in the estate fire soon after her disappearance, leaving no heirs. One article mentioned a trusted associate of the family, Harold Grayson, who had been seen arguing with Clara days before she vanished. Another hinted at a missing jewel, an emerald the size of a robin's egg, part of the Linton fortune. An emerald. Miss Marple's thoughts flicked to Eliza's vision. A ring, a green stone, like an emerald. Coincidence, perhaps, but Miss Marple distrusted coincidences. She thanked Mrs. Phipps and stepped back into the night, the clippings' weight heavy in her mind. As she walked home, a figure caught her eye, a child's silhouette by the churchyard gate. It was Eliza, her face pale under the moonlight. "Eliza, dear," Miss Marple called, softly approaching. "It's late for you to be out." Eliza clutched her coat, her eyes darting. "I saw her again. The lady with the ring. She was at the manor, looking for something. She's scared now." Miss Marple knelt, her voice calm but urgent. "Did you see where she was looking, Eliza?" "In the study," Eliza whispered. "Under the floor. There's something hidden there." Miss Marple's heart quickened. The study, where Grayson's body was found. Thank you, Eliza. Now, go straight home and don't wander alone. Promise me. Eliza nodded and slipped away, leaving Miss Marple alone with the churchyard's silent graves. The past was reaching into the present, and Clara Linton's shadow loomed large. Tomorrow she would visit Grayson Manor. If something was hidden under the floor, she intended to find it before the lady with the emerald ring did. Chapter 4. The Watcher in the Woods. The morning was crisp in St. Mary's Hollow, the air sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. Miss Jane Marple walked along the wooded path toward Grayson Manor, her sensible shoes crunching on fallen leaves. Eliza Wren's words from the previous night, under the floor, there's something hidden there, had kept her awake, her mind threading together the strands of Clara Linton's disappearance, Harold Grayson's murder, and a child who saw too much. She had telephoned Inspector Crane earlier, requesting a visit to the manor under the guise of returning a book Grayson had lent her nephew. The inspector, though sceptical, had agreed, and now she was to meet him at the estate. As she neared the manor's iron gates, a small figure emerged from the underbrush, her patched dress snagging on brambles. "Eliza!" Miss Marple exclaimed, her tone a mix of surprise and reproach. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay home." Eliza's eyes were wide, her breath quick. "I had to come, Miss Marple. I saw it again, the lady with the ring. She's looking for it today. I know where." Miss Marple's instinct was to send the child back, but Eliza's certainty was unnerving. Besides, the manor was crawling with police. Surely it was safe. "Very well," she said, her voice firm. "But you stay close, and you do exactly as I say. Understood?" Eliza nodded, clutching her tattered notebook. Together they passed through the gates and up the gravel drive, the manor's grey stone facade looming like a sentinel. Inspector Crane met them at the door, his moustache twitching with impatience. "Miss Marple, this is highly irregular. And the child, what's she doing here?" "Oh, Inspector," Miss Marple said, her smile serene, "Eliza's my little helper today. She's quite harmless. I only wish to see the study, to confirm something about that book. May we?" Crane grunted but led them inside. The manor's halls were dim, heavy with the scent of polish and decay. In the study, the crimson rug where Grayson's body was found had been removed, leaving bare floorboards. The mantelpiece clock, its ticking now silent, stood as a grim reminder of Eliza's vision. Miss Marple's eyes swept the room, settling on the floor near the desk. "Eliza," she said softly, "where did you say the lady was looking?" Eliza pointed to a corner where the floorboards seemed slightly uneven. "There. She was prying at the wood." Inspector Crane raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as Miss Marple knelt, her fingers tracing the boards. One was loose, its edge splintered. "Inspector, might you have a tool? A letter opener, perhaps?" With a sigh, Crane produced a penknife. Miss Marple pried gently, and the board lifted, revealing a shallow cavity. Inside lay a small dust-covered bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a silver locket, its surface engraved with a delicate CL. Clara Linton, surely. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman with fiery eyes, and a tiny key, no larger than a thimble. "Good heavens!" Crane muttered, taking the locket. "How did you know this was here?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "A hunch, Inspector. Women's intuition, perhaps." Eliza tugged at her sleeve, her voice a whisper. "Miss Marple, someone's watching." Miss Marple followed the child's gaze to the window, where the woods pressed close. For a moment she thought she saw a shadow move among the trees. A flicker of motion, then nothing. Her heart quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Inspector, might we take the locket for safekeeping, and perhaps ensure Eliza gets home safely?" Crane, now alert, nodded. "I'll have a constable escort her, and I'll want a full explanation later, Miss Marple." "Of course," she said, her mind already elsewhere. As they left the manor, Eliza's hand in hers, Miss Marple glanced back at the woods. The shadow was gone, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The locket was a clue, and the key within it pointed to something larger. A safe, a box, perhaps a secret Clara Linton had died to protect. But the watcher in the woods was no phantom. Someone knew they were close, and that someone was dangerous. "Eliza," Miss Marple said as they reached the village, "you mustn't come to the manor again. Not until I say, promise me." Eliza's eyes were solemn. "I promise. But she's not done, Miss Marple. The lady with the ring, she's angry now." Miss Marple watched the constable lead Eliza away, her thoughts a tangle of clues and warnings. The locket, the key, the emerald ring, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was still unclear. One thing was certain: the watcher in the woods would not stay hidden forever. Chapter 5. The Village Suspects. The midday sun bathed St. Mary's Hollow in a deceptive glow, as if the village could shrug off the shadow of Harold Grayson's murder. Miss Jane Marple sat on a bench outside the village church, her knitting needles clicking softly, her eyes scanning the passers-by. The locket and key from Grayson Manor weighed heavily in her thoughts, tucked safely in her bag alongside Eliza. Wren's notebook, Clara Linton's initials, the emerald ring, and a watcher in the woods. Each was a thread in a tapestry she was only beginning to weave. To find the pattern, she needed to know the players, and St. Mary's Hollow had no shortage of suspects. Her first stop was the Grayson Estate's housekeeper, Mrs. Agnes Poole, who was sweeping the steps of the village hall. Agnes was a wiry woman in her 50s, her face etched with years of resentment. Miss Marple approached with a smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Poole. Such a terrible business at the manor. You must be dreadfully shaken." Agnes paused, her grip tightening on the broom. "Shaken? I'm not one for tears, Miss Marple. Mr. Grayson was a hard man, paid my wages late and snapped at every turn. I'm not sorry he's gone, if you'll pardon my bluntness." "Oh, I quite understand," Miss Marple said, her tone sympathetic. "It can't have been easy, working for such a man. Did you see anything odd that night? Someone lingering, perhaps?" Agnes's eyes narrowed. "I left at 6, like always. The manor was quiet. If there was trouble, it came after." She hesitated, then added, "Though I did see Dr. Hargrove's nurse, Miss Ellis, walking near the gates that evening. Odd time for a stroll, if you ask me." Miss Marple nodded, filing the detail away. "Thank you, Mrs. Poole. You've been most helpful." As Agnes returned to her sweeping, Miss Marple noted the woman's calloused hands. No rings, Emerald, or otherwise, but her bitterness toward Grayson was palpable, and bitterness could fester into something darker. Next, she visited the vicarage, where Reverend Thomas Bell was tending his rose garden. The vicar was a handsome man in his 40s, with a charm that made him a village favourite. "Miss Marple," he called, brushing dirt from his hands, "what brings you to my humble patch? Not more talk of that dreadful murder, I hope." "Afraid so," Miss Marple said, her eyes twinkling. "A village tragedy affects us all, doesn't it? I understand Mr. Grayson wasn't a regular at your services, but did you know him well?" Reverend Bell's smile faltered. "Not well, no. He was generous with donations, but private. Came to me once, years ago, asking about forgiveness. Said he'd wronged someone long ago. I pressed, but he wouldn't say more." "Fascinating," Miss Marple murmured. "A wrong from the past. Clara Linton, perhaps. And where were you the night he died, if I may be so bold?" The vicar chuckled, unfazed. "In my study preparing my sermon. My wife can vouch for me. She was up late with her embroidery." He gestured to his hands, adorned with a simple wedding band. No emerald ring, but his wife, Mrs. Bell, was known for her fondness for jewellery. Miss Marple made a mental note to meet her. Her final stop was the village surgery, where Dr. Simon Hargrove and his nurse, Miss Laura Ellis, worked. Dr. Hargrove, a gruff man nearing 60, was examining a patient, so Miss Marple found Miss Ellis in the dispensary, measuring powders. Laura was a quiet woman in her 30s, her movements precise, her eyes guarded. "Miss Ellis," Miss Marple began, "I hear you were near Grayson Manor the evening of the murder. Just a walk, was it?" Laura's hand froze, then resumed, measuring. "Who told you that?" "Yes, I was walking. I often do to clear my head after a long day. I saw nothing unusual." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her gaze lingering on Laura's hands. A thin silver ring adorned her left hand, but its stone was blue, not green. "Mr. Grayson was a patient, wasn't he? A difficult one, I imagine." Laura's lips tightened. "He was demanding, always complaining about pains that weren't there. Dr. Hargrove saw him last, the day he died, said he was fit as ever." Miss Marple thanked her and left, her mind buzzing. Agnes Poole's resentment, the vicar's vague confession, Laura Ellis's defensiveness, each held a piece of the puzzle, but none wore an emerald ring, and yet Eliza's vision was clear. A woman, angry, with a green stone. As she returned to her bench, she opened the locket again, studying Clara Linton's photograph. The woman's eyes seemed to plead, as if begging her to uncover the truth. A rustle in the hedge made her look up. No one was there, but the air felt heavy, as if eyes were on her. She tucked the locket away, her resolve hardening. The village was full of secrets, and one of its residents was a killer. She would need to tread carefully and keep Eliza safe. Chapter 6. A Dangerous Game. The twilight draped St. Mary's Hollow in a veil of grey, the village lanterns flickering like hesitant stars. Miss Jane Marple sat by her nephew's hearth, Eliza Wren's notebook and Clara Linton's locket on the table before her. The suspects, Mrs. Poole, Reverend Bell, Miss Ellis, each carried motives, but none fit the shadow of the woman with the emerald ring. Eliza's latest vision of something hidden under the manor's floor had yielded the locket, but the key inside it unlocked nothing yet. Miss Marple's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp rap at the door. It was Mrs. Bantry, her face flushed with alarm. "Miss Marple, come quick! It's Eliza Wren! She's been hurt!" Miss Marple's heart sank. She grabbed her shawl and followed Mrs. Bantry through the village, her mind racing. They reached the Wren cottage, where a small crowd had gathered. Mrs. Wren knelt beside Eliza, who lay on the grass, her face pale, a gash on her forehead. A broken cart, its wheels splintered, stood nearby. Inspector Crane was already there, scribbling in his notebook. "Mrs. Wren, what happened?" Miss Marple asked, kneeling beside the child. Mrs. Wren's voice trembled. She was playing near the lane, chasing that notebook of hers. The cart, it came out of nowhere, fast as anything. If she hadn't jumped, it'd have... She choked back a sob. Eliza stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Miss Marple," she whispered, her voice weak. "It wasn't an accident. I saw her, the lady." She pushed the cart. A chill ran through Miss Marple. She glanced at Inspector Crane, who frowned but said nothing. "Eliza, dear, did you see her face this time?" Eliza shook her head, wincing. "Just the ring, green shining. She was angry, said I'd ruin everything." Miss Marple's mind whirled. The killer knew Eliza's visions, and this was no mere warning. It was an attempt on her life. "Inspector," she said, her tone calm but firm. "This was no accident. Someone meant to harm this child. I suggest you post a constable at the Wren cottage tonight." Crane's moustache twitched. "Miss Marple, you're jumping to conclusions. 1010 would recommend. I'm not sure if I should be recommending this or not. It's a bit of a mess, but it's a good idea to get a good idea of what's going on in the world of Skyrim." Miss Marple helped Mrs. Wren carry Eliza inside, settling her on the sofa. As Mrs. Wren fetched a damp cloth, Miss Marple sat beside the child, her voice soft. "Eliza, you're very brave, but you must stay indoors now with your mother. No more chasing visions, not until we find this woman." Eliza nodded, her eyes heavy. "She's scared, Miss Marple. She knows you're close. The key, it's for something in the church." Miss Marple's breath caught. The church, Reverend Bell's domain. The key from Clara Linton's locket might unlock a safe, a box, something hidden in plain sight. She patted Eliza's hand. "Rest now, dear. You've done enough." Outside, Miss Marple found Inspector Crane questioning villagers about the cart. "Any witnesses?" she asked. "None. Clear," Crane said. "It was dusk and the lane's quiet, but the cart belongs to the vicarage, used for garden clippings. Reverend Bell says it was in the shed all day." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The vicarage again. Reverend Bell had spoken of Grayson's guilt, and his wife was fond of jewellery. Could she be the woman with the ring? Or was someone framing them? "Inspector, I'd like to visit the church tomorrow. I believe there's something we've overlooked." Crane sighed. "You're meddling, Miss Marple, but fine. Tomorrow, first thing." As Miss Marple walked home, the village felt smaller, its shadows deeper. Eliza's accident was a desperate move, proof the killer was cornered. The church held answers, and the key would unlock them. But the woman with the emerald ring was watching, and Miss Marple knew she'd strike again if they got too close. She tightened her grip on her bag, the locket and notebook inside. The game was dangerous now, and Eliza was its most vulnerable. Player. Chapter 7. The Forgotten Diary. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Hollow's church, casting jewel-like patterns on the stone floor. Miss Jane Marple stood near the vestry, the tiny key from Clara Linton's locket clutched in her hand. Eliza's words, "The key, it's for something in the church," had brought her here, accompanied by a sceptical Inspector Crane and a curious Reverend Bell. The attempt on Eliza's life the previous evening had sharpened Miss Marple's resolve. The killer was desperate, and the church held a secret that could unravel everything. "Miss Marple, I must protest," Reverend Bell said, his charm strained. "This is a house of worship, not a treasure hunt. What do you expect to find?" "Oh, nothing so grand," Miss Marple said, her tone mild. "Just a small matter of clarification. This key, found in Mr. Grayson's study, might belong to something here. A box, perhaps, or a locked drawer." Inspector Crane, arms crossed, nodded to the Reverend. "Humour her, Bell. Let's see this through." Reverend Bell sighed and led them to the vestry, a cluttered room filled with hymnals and old furniture. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the space, settling on a carved oak cabinet in the corner. Its lock was small, ornate, matching the key's delicate design. "Might we try this?" she asked. Bell hesitated, then nodded. Miss Marple inserted the key, and with a soft click, the cabinet opened. Inside was a dusty, leather-bound book, its cover embossed with C.L., Clara Linton's initials. Miss Marple's heart quickened as she lifted it, revealing a diary, its pages brittle but intact. "Good Lord," Crane muttered. "How did that get here?" "A question worth asking," Miss Marple said, opening the diary. The entries, written in a flowing hand, began in 1904, detailing Clara's life as the Linton heiress. One passage caught her eye. "Father insists I marry Harold, but I cannot. He covets the emerald, not me. I've hidden it where no one will look, not in the manor, but with the one I trust." Another entry, dated days before her disappearance, read, "I fear for my life. Harold knows too much. I've given the truth to E.W. She'll keep it safe." "E.W.," Miss Marple murmured. "Eliza Wren's initials. Could it be coincidence?" She turned to Reverend Bell. "Did Clara Linton ever confide in you, Reverend? Or leave something in your care?" Bell's face paled. She came to me once, before she vanished. Said she was leaving the village. She left a book, asked me to keep it safe. I thought it was a prayer book, nothing more. I locked it away and forgot it." Crane's eyes narrowed. "And you never thought to mention this?" "I didn't connect it to her disappearance," Bell protested. "It was 20 years ago." Miss Marple tucked the diary into her bag, her mind racing. E.W. might be Eliza's mother, Ellen Wren, who would have been young when Clara vanished. Or was it another Wren? She needed to speak to Mrs. Wren. "Thank you, Reverend," she said. "Inspector, I'll return the diary after I've studied it. It may hold answers." As they left the church, Miss Marple visited the Wren cottage. Mrs. Wren was pale, tending to Eliza, who was recovering from her injury. "Mrs. Wren," Miss Marple began, "did you know Clara Linton? Perhaps as a young woman?" Mrs. Wren froze, her hands trembling. "Clara? Why, yes, I knew her. We were friends before she disappeared. She was kind to me, gave me a few of her things when she left. Why do you ask?" Miss Marple showed her the diary's final entry. "Clara mentions an E.W. Could that be you?" Mrs. Wren's eyes widened. She did give me a letter once, told me to keep it hidden. I thought it was nonsense, a love letter maybe. It's in the attic in an old trunk." She fetched the letter, its seal broken but intact. It read, "If I am gone, tell no one of the emerald. It's in the hollow under the rose. Trust no one, not even H.G. Miss Marple's breath caught. The hollow, perhaps the woods near the manor. And H.G. Harold Grayson, Mrs. Wren, this is vital," Miss Marple said. "Keep it safe and tell no one. Eliza's safety depends on it." As she left, Miss Marple felt the weight of the diary and letter. Clara had hidden an emerald, and Grayson had died for it. Eliza's visions were tied to this secret, but how? The killer was circling, and the hollow held the next clue. Miss Marple glanced at the church spire, its shadow long and dark. Time was running out, and the woman with the emerald ring was closer than ever. Chapter 8. The night of truth, the moon hung low over St. Mary's Hollow, its light silvering the woods that fringed Grayson Manor. Miss Jane Marple stood in the manor's shadowed garden, her shawl wrapped tightly against the chill. Clara Linton's diary and letter, now safely with Inspector Crane, had pointed to a hidden emerald in the hollow, under a rose. But the woman with the emerald ring, the killer, remained a shadow, and Eliza Wren's safety hung in the balance. Miss Marple had devised a plan, risky but necessary, to lure the murderer into the open. Tonight, the truth would come to light. She had spread a careful rumour through Mrs. Bantry, known for her loose tongue. Eliza had remembered more, a vision of the emerald's exact location, and Miss Marple would take her to the Hollow at midnight to find it. In truth, Eliza was safe at home, guarded by a constable, while Inspector Crane and 2 officers hid in the manor's shrubbery. Miss Marple, armed only with her wits and a flashlight, was the bait, the Hollow, a sunken clearing circled by wild roses, lay just beyond the manor's gates. Miss Marple reached it, her heart steady despite the silence that pressed around her. She knelt by a rosebush, pretending to dig, her flashlight casting erratic beams. The diary's clue, under the rose, had led her here, but she suspected the emerald was long gone, taken by the killer. This was about drawing them out. A twig snapped. Miss Marple froze, her ears straining. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, approached. She stood, turning slowly, her flashlight catching a figure in a dark cloak. The woman's face was half hidden, but her hand glinted, a silver ring with a green stone, an emerald gleaming in the light. "Stop where you are," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but firm. "I know who you are, and I know what you've done." The figure stepped closer, revealing the sharp features of Laura Ellis, Dr. Hargrove's nurse. Her eyes burned with a mix of fear and fury. "You're meddling, old woman," she hissed. "You and that child, you've ruined everything." Miss Marple's mind raced, piecing together the final threads. "You killed Harold Grayson, didn't you? For the emerald Clara Linton hid. You were her cousin, weren't you? The one she trusted until you betrayed her." Laura's laugh was bitter. "Cousin? No. I was her confidant, her maid. Clara promised me a share of the fortune if I helped her hide it from Grayson. But she lied, hid it, and ran. I spent years searching until Grayson let slip where it was. He thought he could keep it for himself." "So you stabbed him," Miss Marple said, her tone steady. "And when Eliza's visions revealed you, you tried to silence her." Laura's hand tightened on a knife, its blade catching the moonlight. That child, she saw too much. Just like Clara. I won't let you stop me now." Before Laura could lunge, Inspector Crane's voice boomed from the darkness. "Drop the knife, Miss Ellis." Officers emerged, their torches blinding. Laura froze, her face crumpling as the knife fell. Crane cuffed her, his expression grim. "You've got some explaining to do." As Laura was led away, Miss Marple exhaled, her knees trembling. The trap had worked, but something nagged at her. Laura's desperation felt incomplete, as if a piece of the puzzle was still missing. The emerald ring matched Eliza's vision, but Clara's diary mentioned a hollow, and Laura hadn't found the gem. Was there more to this than greed? She returned to the manor, where Crane was barking orders. "Well done, Miss Marple," he said grudgingly. "But how did you know it was her?" "Eliza's visions," Miss Marple said, "and a bit of village gossip. Miss Ellis was seen near the manor that night, and her ring was unmistakable. But, Inspector, I think we need to look closer at Clara's diary. There's more to this story." Crane nodded, but Miss Marple's thoughts were elsewhere. Laura's confession tied up the murder, but Eliza's memories, vivid, impossible, hinted at a deeper truth. As she walked back to the village, the moonlit hollow seemed to whisper, urging her to dig deeper. The night had revealed a killer, but the final secret was yet to come. Chapter 9. The final twist. The dawn broke over St. Mary's Hollow with a fragile light, as if the village itself were holding its breath. Miss Jane Marple sat in the Wren cottage, a cup of tea untouched before her. Laura Ellis's arrest the previous night had closed the case of Harold Grayson's murder, yet a nagging unease lingered. Eliza's visions, so precise, so vivid, could not be explained by Laura's guilt alone. The diary, the locket, the emerald ring, they pointed to Clara Linton's fate. But the child's memories were a puzzle Miss Marple had yet to solve. Today she would unravel it. Eliza sat across from her, her forehead bandaged but her eyes clear. Mrs. Wren hovered nearby, wringing her hands. "Miss Marple," Mrs. Wren said, "Laura's caught. Eliza's safe now, isn't she?" "I hope so," Miss Marple said, her tone gentle but probing. "But I need to understand Eliza's visions. They've been too accurate, too specific. Eliza, dear, can you tell me more about how they feel? When you see these things, is it like a dream?" Eliza frowned, clutching her notebook. "Not a dream. It's like I'm remembering someone else's life. I see her, Clara, running, hiding. I feel her fear. It's in my head like it happened to me." Miss Marple's heart quickened. The idea had been forming, but it was audacious, almost unthinkable. She opened Clara's diary, rereading the final entry. "I've given the truth to E.W. She'll keep it safe." Then she turned to Mrs. Wren. "Ellen, you said Clara gave you a letter. Did she ever mention a child? Or someone close to her? Someone she might have trusted completely?" Mrs. Wren's face paled. "A child? No, she... Well, there was talk she'd been with someone, not Grayson. A secret love, maybe. But she never said more." Miss Marple's mind raced. She looked at Eliza, her tangled hair and wide eyes, and a theory took shape. A theory so startling it reshaped the entire case. "Eliza," she said softly, "how old are you?" 10, Eliza replied. "And you, Ellen, when did you come to St. Mary's Hollow?" Mrs. Wren hesitated. "About 10 years ago. I was expecting Eliza then. My husband had just died and I needed a fresh start." Miss Marple's voice was barely a whisper. "And before that? Were you ever near the Linton estate, perhaps as a servant?" Mrs. Wren's hands trembled. Yes, I worked for the Lintons briefly before the fire." "Why?" Miss Marple closed the diary, her heart heavy. because I believe Eliza is Clara Linton's daughter. Clara didn't vanish. She died, likely, at Grayson's hands after giving birth in secret. You, Ellen, took the child, raised her as your own to protect her. Eliza's visions aren't visions. They're memories, inherited somehow from her mother's trauma. Mrs. Wren gasped, tears spilling. No, it can't be. I found Eliza abandoned near the estate. Clara begged me to take her, said Grayson would kill them both. I never knew for sure, but I loved her like my own. Eliza's eyes widened, her voice small. I'm Clara's daughter? Miss Marple nodded, her voice gentle. Your memories, Eliza, are echoes of Clara's last days. Science may not explain it, but I've seen stranger things in human hearts. You saw Laura kill Grayson because Clara's fear, her pain, lives in you. But there was more. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the emerald, still missing, and a detail from Laura's confession. Grayson let slip where it was. Laura had been desperate, but not cunning enough to orchestrate the theft alone. Someone else had known. Someone who'd manipulated her. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Ellen, who else knew about Clara's letter? No one, Mrs. Wren said. I kept it hidden. But Miss Marple's mind flashed to the vicarage, to Reverend Bell's too smooth charm, his knowledge of Grayson's guilt. She stood, her resolve hardening. I need to see Inspector Crane. There's one more piece to this. At the police station, Miss Marple laid out her theory. Reverend Bell is the mastermind, she said. He knew Clara's secret, took the emerald after her death, and used Laura to silence Grayson when he grew suspicious. Bell's alibi is his wife, who'd lie for him. And his sermon notes? I glimpsed them in the vestry, written in a hand that matches Clara's letter, a code he used to track the emerald. Crane, stunned, sent officers to the vicarage. They returned with Bell, his charm gone, and a hidden safe containing the Linton emerald. You've no proof, Bell spat, but the emerald and a letter in his hand confessing to Clara's murder sealed his fate. Miss Marple sighed, the weight of truth settling. Bell had orchestrated it all, using Laura as a pawn, while Eliza's memories exposed his sins. The case was solved, but the cost was heavy. She returned to the Wren cottage, where Eliza clung to her mother, her visions finally understood. You're safe now, dear, Miss Marple said, patting Eliza's hand. Your mother, both of them, would be proud. Chapter 10. The Light of Resolution. The spring sun bathed St. Mary's Hollow in a golden haze, softening the scars of the winter's tragedy. A week had passed since Reverend Bell's arrest, and the village was slowly knitting itself back together. Miss Jane Marple sat on a bench in the churchyard, her knitting needles idle for once, her eyes resting on the roses that bloomed near the gate. The Linton emerald, recovered from Bell's safe, had been returned to the estate's surviving trustees, destined for a museum. Laura Ellis and Bell faced justice, their crimes laid bare by a child's impossible memories and Miss Marple's quiet persistence. Inside the Wren cottage, Eliza Wren was finding her own peace. Miss Marple had visited earlier, bringing a small gift, a new notebook, its pages crisp and blank. "For your own stories, dear," she'd said, smiling. "Not Clara's, but yours." Eliza had hugged her tightly, her eyes brighter than Miss Marple had ever seen. "I don't see her any more," she'd whispered. "The vision's stopped. It's like she knows I'm safe." Mrs. Wren, now openly acknowledged as Eliza's adoptive mother, had wept with relief. "You've given us our lives back, Miss Marple. I thought keeping Clara's secret would protect Eliza, but it only brought danger." "Nonsense," Miss Marple had replied. "You gave her a home, Ellen. That's what matters." Now, as Miss Marple watched the village stir, Mrs. Tuttle bustling with gossip, Tommy Pierce delivering bread, she reflected on the case. Eliza's memories, a rare echo of her mother's trauma, had been the key. Science might scoff, but Miss Marple knew the heart-held mysteries no laboratory could explain. Clara Linton's love for her unborn child had reached across decades, guiding Eliza to the truth. Inspector Crane approached. His usual gruffness softened. "Miss Marple, you've turned my case upside down. The chief constable's singing your praises, though I'll never admit I needed the help." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Oh, Inspector, I only pointed out what was there. You'd have found it eventually." Crane chuckled, tipping his hat. "You're staying on, then?" "Just a few more days," she said. "My nephew's garden needs tending, and I've a mind to finish my scarf." As Crane walked away, Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the church, its spire no longer ominous. Reverend Bell's betrayal had shaken the village, but a new vicar was coming, and the congregation was already planning a fete. St. Mary's Hollow would heal, as villages do, its secrets buried but not forgotten. She rose, tucking her knitting into her bag. Eliza was playing in the lane, laughing with other children, her notebook tucked under her arm. The sight warmed Miss Marple's heart. The child who remembered too much had found her own story at last. As she walked toward her nephew's cottage, Miss Marple thought of Clara Linton, whose love had outlived her. Memory, she mused, was a powerful thing, a silent witness to truth, and in St. Mary's Hollow, truth had prevailed. Epilogue. A new page. The summer breeze carried the scent of lavender through St. Mary's Hollow, rustling the pages of a book in Miss Jane Marple's lap. She sat in her nephew's garden, her visit to the village nearing its end. The events of Harold Grayson's murder, Clara Linton's tragedy, and Eliza Wren's extraordinary memories had settled into the village's lore, whispered over tea but no longer feared. Miss Marple, preparing to return to St. Mary Mead, had one last call to make. The Wren cottage was brighter now, its windows open, its garden tamed. Eliza, now 11, greeted her at the door, her face alight with a confidence Miss Marple hadn't seen before. "Miss Marple!" she exclaimed, brandishing her new notebook. "I wrote something. Will you read it?" "Of course, dear," Miss Marple said, settling into the parlour. Mrs. Wren bustling in with a tray of scones, smiled, a smile unburdened by secrets. The revelation of Eliza's true parentage had strengthened their bond, and Ellen Wren had become a pillar of the village, helping organize the upcoming fete. Eliza handed over the notebook, its pages filled with the story of a girl who solved mysteries with her heart. "It's not like Clara's memories," she said shyly. "It's mine. I want to be like you someday, Miss Marple, finding truth." Miss Marple's eyes softened as she read, the words vibrant with imagination. "You've a gift, Eliza, not just for seeing, but for telling. Keep writing, and you'll find your own way." Mrs. Wren sat beside them, her voice tentative. "Miss Marple, there's something else. The Linton trustees sent a letter. They're setting up a fund for Eliza from Clara's estate. It's not much, but it'll see her through school, maybe university." "That's wonderful," Miss Marple said, her heart lifting. Clara's legacy, it seemed, would live on in her daughter's future. "And the village, how does it fare?" "Better," Mrs. Wren said. "The new vicar's kind, and folk are talking again, not whispering. Even Mrs. Tuttle's found nicer gossip." Eliza giggled, and Miss Marple joined in, the sound mingling with the breeze. As they chatted, Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the case. Reverend Bell's trial had ended with a confession, revealing how he'd manipulated Laura Ellis, exploiting her greed to cover his own theft of the Linton emerald. The emerald itself, now in a museum, drew visitors to St. Mary's Hollow, a small boon for the village's economy. But it was Eliza's courage, her ability to carry her mother's memories and emerge whole, that lingered most in Miss Marple's mind. As she rose to leave, Eliza hugged her. "Will you come back, Miss Marple?" "I always do, dear," Miss Marple said, patting her cheek. "Villages like this have a way of calling one home." She walked back through the village, passing the church where new roses bloomed, a tribute to Clara. St. Mary's Hollow was at peace, its wounds healed by truth and time. Miss Marple boarded her train the next day, her knitting bag at her side, her thoughts on Eliza. The child who remembered too much had become a girl who dreamed of more, a silent witness no longer, but a voice for the future.